Guys, my name's Melissa. This is Practically Creative. Welcome back if you've been here before, and welcome if you're new to my channel. Today we're going to create a tote bag from a couple of orphan blocks that I have floating around my sewing room, and they are Dresden blocks. I made these for whatever, I just felt like making Dresdens. And today I'm going to turn them into a small tote bag as an Easter tote bag for one of the grandkids to carry their Easter eggs in, or for you to put their candy in for their Easter basket, just in case you want to do something that isn't necessarily Easter bunny or whatever related. So come along with me. I'm going to move you over to the cutting table and the sewing machine and show you what we're working on. So I folded over my fabric and I just sewed it down one side. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this end off. I could have cut it before I sewed it, but that didn't seem necessary. Get rid of our scrap. And now I'm going to open up our fabric and just finger press here. And then I'm going to fold it. So that everything's flat, and then I'm going to lay this down. And this is going to work out perfectly because we want the lining to be a little bit smaller than the outside of the bag. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to slide this down this way. And I'm going to cut off the excess fabric. This could be used for my handles, or it could be put into my scrap bin. I will probably use it for my handles. And then since this is the lining, I'm just going to keep it the way it is. Line everything up straight. And I'm going to sew a seam down this side and down this side. And I'm going to leave myself an opening over here where I can turn my bag through. And then I'm going to take my two Dresdens and I'm going to put them face to face. And I'm going to sew around three sides of this. So I'm just going to go down and around the side. One of them's a tiny bit smaller than the other, not going to be a big issue. Let's see how we do this. Now I'm using a Baby Lock Jazz sewing machine, and I'm going to use a little more than 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. I have got a 2.5 stitch length, and it's a straight stitch length. And I'm just going to sew down the sides. And I'm going to back stitch. And I called it the right thing today. Usually I call it backspace. What I did there was I just made sure that my needle stayed down whenever I stopped sewing. Sew across the bottom. If you decided that you wanted to embellish this, embroider a name on it, or add anything else, you should do that before you start sewing your tote bag together, which is one of the reasons that I made my Dresdens before I put the bag together. I'm back stitching on that other side. Snip that, and I saw there's a thread up here. I'm going to go ahead and snip that off. Now, at this point, For the outside of the bag, you can cut off your corners some to reduce bulk. Just don't cut through your stitching. And when I take it over to the cutting table, I'll trim that bottom edge just a bit. And then here is our lining. I'm going to stitch right along this side. And I'm going to stitch this side all the way down, top to bottom. I am going to back stitch. And back stitching at the top and at the bottom on that. And then on this side, I'm going to start stitching from the top down. And there's my first mark, so I'm going to stitch all the way to there. And I'm back stitching. I'll remove it. You could just jump over this if you wanted to. I'm going to remove it and cut my threads. And then I will go down to the next mark, and I left myself quite a big area to turn this out. I have arthritis and little holes just don't work for me. So now I stitch the bottom of that. And I'm going to cut off all my little stray threads while I'm here. Get the cutting table for a minute. And the reason that we're back over here is because I need to do a bit of trimming. I'm going to trim along that edge, like my rotary cutter here. Okay, so now we're going to trim along this edge, get rid of that excess fabric. And this edge is pretty much trimmed already. Double check to make sure that everything is sewn in. I don't need more than 1/4 of an inch of seam here, so I'll trim this one down. And I will trim the bottom. So there's our waist fabric. Now, I'm going to set both pieces aside for just a minute. And the reason I'm going to do that is so that I can cut this fabric to create myself a handle or a pair of handles. And what I'm doing is, and I'm going to turn this around, don't want to reach over. I'm just cutting a 2.5 inch wide strip. I don't need long handles on this. So I'm going to cut my 2.5 inch wide strip. I'm going to fold it all over in half. And I'm finger pressing. You can use an iron to do this if you prefer. So I'm just finger pressing everything down here. sewing machine, all I'm doing is the same fairly short stitch, and I'm doing about 1/8 of an inch seam allowance down each edge so I can top stitch this. Tip as I'm doing this, I'm not watching the needle, I'm watching right here at the edge of my piece of fabric and lining it up with where I want it lined up in order to get the stitch length that I want. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this handle piece in half. I've stitched everything down both sides, so it's done. And then I'm going to fold it over, cut it in half. And why did I cut it in half? Well, here's why. I'm going to bring the outer portion of my bag over here, and I'm going to turn it right side out. And now that I've done that, I'm going to pin, without putting a twist in it, my handle to my bag. Now it's a little easier because I have this Dresden to kind of measure off of. But I'm going to pin it up here. And I'm leaving myself 1/4 to 1/2 an inch above the top of the bag, right there. And then once I have one side pinned, I'm turning it over and I'm going to pin the other side of the handle on here. Again, 1/4 to 1/2 an inch. And if you notice, I'm lining my handles up together. So, see how they line up? But I'm not pinning them together. They're going to get sewn, excuse me, separately from one another. Now, if you can take the arm off your machine, you can do that. I'm not going to. But you do want to just baste. So you want to go very close to the edge and just baste your handle on there. A few stitches back and forth will hold it in place. And my pin is not in there where it's going to hit my needle. So that's out of the way. Snip my threads off. So I don't need stray threads over there. Let's do this one. Make sure you don't catch the other one down in there. Somebody told me the other day I sound professional. I was like, oh, that's scary. I'm a fly by the seat of my pants sewer for the most part. So I do things my way, not necessarily the way it's normally taught. So if you've seen a different method from someone else and you prefer that method, please use that method. I am not going to tell you that anybody else is wrong. This is just the Melissa method. This is how I do things, and it works for me. And obviously, this is not professional bag making. This is just, I'm making a tote bag. I'm anticipating that it's going to get used as a little Easter bag for hunting Easter eggs or something like that. It's not going to be anything that is kept for posterity. practical part of my name means that I'm usually making utility things. Okay, and now that our handles are on here, and they're not on great, they're just on enough so I don't have to use pins. We're going to take our bag, and it's still right side out. We're going to pick up our lining, which is inside out, and we are going to put the outer portion of the bag down inside the inner portion of the bag. And if that's confusing to you, the most important thing is that you want the right side of the lining to face the right side of the bag. So they're right sides together. And then we're going to go, and here's how you line it all up. You're going to take your side seams and you're going to pin those together. Do both side seams. All my extra fabric is wanting to join us over here. We're going to take the two side seams and we're going to join them together. Because I'm a quilter, I love when seams nest, so that's what I'm doing, is nesting my seams. And you will notice I still have an opening down this one side seam. I pinned that to the wrong seam. Side seam, not that seam that's in your lining fabric. So let me fix that. And then usually you can just set it down here and see that it's all together, which is what we're doing here. I'm going to sew from the outside, which is the inside of all of this, around, and I'm just going to use maybe a 1/2 inch seam allowance. I'm going to backspace there. Now I know I put my seams on the outside, or excuse me, my pins on the outside of what I'm sewing. That's fine. I will take those pins out as I get to them. I can both feel it and see it right here. So that pin comes out. I'm just going to keep everything lined up together. And every once in a while, because this is a round shape, you want to stop, make sure that everything is still lined up. You're lining up your edges, not your handles or anything else. I am trying to keep this seam completely straight. And you may notice that I'm sewing over the handles, but I'm not backspacing. That's because when I turn this bag out, that is when I will backspace, backstitch, and add some more security to my handles. Stitch over a couple of stitches and backstitch a couple stitches. Now, if this jagged edge at the top bothers you, you can trim it. I'm not going to, and I definitely would not trim the pieces of the handle that are sticking out. So now we're going to go over here to the side and we're going to find our hole and we're going to start turning everything out. If you want to iron your bag before you stitch it around the top, this is a good time to turn your iron on and let it be getting warm. And I'm going to slide my hand in there and push all of my corners out. There's the corner of my lining, Then I'm going to go down here, make sure the corner of my outer portion is pushed all the way out. Okay. Now, here's the side where we left the hole. And if you pull it out straight, most of the time it's just going to lay down for you. And I'm just going to top stitch right down that side edge of the bag to make sure I close that hole up. And I am going to back stitch just a couple of stitches. Okay. Now here is our little bag. I'm going to push the lining down inside. And we are going to get this pressed, so let's go over to the iron. Okay, so we're over here at the iron, and before I do anything else, I'm going to make sure that with my fingers, I push all of the lining down inside. So my little bag is all tucked in there. I'm pushing my corners all the way down in. You see, that looks really cute. The iron's hot, so let's get this all a nice iron. And I really don't want my lining to come up over the edge of the white. So I'm making sure that I iron the lining down inside the white. And now that that is ironed, I'm going to take it back to the sewing machine, and I'm going to put just a little 1/4 inch top stitch around the top edge of my bag. If you have an arm on your machine, you may want to take the arm off, but let's go over here and do this. Here we are at the sewing machine, and I'm going to push the bottom section down out of my way and make sure that I have just this top section. I'm going to start right here by the handle, and I'm going to do a little top stitch, and see that I did a little tiny back stitch over the top of that handle. And I'm just going to keep using my fingers to make sure that the rest of the bag stays out of the way. I'm going to back stitch across the handles. It's been stitched a couple of times now, but that little back stitch makes everything lay where you want it to lay. And I'm double checking, like right here. Got a little bit of the brown poking up. I don't want that. So I'm going to push it down with my finger and pull the white back up to the top. If you're an impatient sewer like I am, let me tell you, this is the one place where you want to go dig for those reserves of patience. You cannot do this fast. Want that, if you're back stitching over your handles, you want to make sure that that back stitch stays exactly on the previous top stitch so that you don't see 2 lines of stitching there. I know, it's just an Easter egg bag, but, and then the other thing is I like to make sure that that handle stays straight. Doesn't go off at a wonky from my tote bag. Okay. So all I've got left to do is to snip a couple of little threads. And we have a tote bag. So let's take a couple of pictures of it for you guys so you can see it up close. And I appreciate you watching, and we'll give you some better pictures.